The internet tells me that this is the sequel you guys have been waiting for. Welcome back to my channel, and today, this is it. We're finally going to cover part 2 of my quest for perfect white slimes. Every quest needs a purpose, and this is something that hasn't been explored before in Stardew Valley. What we know is that white slimes drop diamonds 100% of the time if all of their red, green, and blue values are even numbers. The idea here was to breed hundreds of white slimes like a professional slime rancher and then profit off of all of the diamonds that they drop. This is part 2 of my project, so if you haven't seen the first video, pause this one and watch it first because there's a lot to cover, including slime mechanics and the many hours of testing that got me to where I am now. With that said, let's briefly recap how things have gone for this project so far. I created a large slime pen on my farm because the slime hutch only allows you to have 20 slimes at any given time. I threw some randomly colored slime eggs that I had farmed in incubators and froze time with a mod to let them breed. The mod isn't necessary for this project, but it makes things a lot easier without having to end each day every few minutes and the fact that slimes won't be escaping overnight. I bred my slime herd looking for gray and pastel colors indicating higher RGB color values. If you remember from the last video, white slimes have high RGB values that each need to be above 230. After many hours of selective breeding, I was left with a horde of gray slimes. They're close, but not quite white because they drop stone instead of iron ore. I took what I learned from the first experiment and applied it to my next attempt. I began splitting slimes by both color and gender. Using this method, I could breed red slimes with green slimes to get yellow slimes. I could then breed those with blue slimes to get gray slimes with high RGB color values. This also meant that I knew each slime's RGB values were high, with green being the lowest likely value because yellow slimes only need a green value of 180. I bred my gray slimes with some more green slimes in hopes of increasing that value, and after several sessions, I finally had my first white slime. I knew this because he dropped iron ore when slain. I had made some great progress and eventually I had a farm full of white slimes, but there was a problem. I slayed the lot of them and they were all dropping iron ore, but no diamonds. Ultimately, I concluded that I would need to keep breeding for dozens of hours in hopes of finding a white slime with even RGB values. So now we're all caught up. I continued to breed white slimes without any direction and diamonds were still not dropping. That's when I realized I needed help from some friends. Luckily, I've met a bunch of great people through this channel and the Stardew Valley Discord server. My first savior was Orpheus. They created a mod for me by editing another mod called Farm Type Manager. While I'm not able to spawn white slimes outside on the ranch, we can spawn them in the slime hutch itself. So, what does this do for me exactly? Well, first, it proves that this project is in fact possible, but also it helped me understand what exactly I was aiming for. You see, I had some more help from others. Soon after, I met Donovan and we began bouncing some ideas around. After some investigation, he found that we can actually view the RGB values of each slime using the data mining feature of the Lookup Anything mod. I could now see that the slimes in the hutch had all RGB values equal to 254. They also drop diamonds 100% of the time, which was a beautiful sight to finally see for the first time. Now, all I'll need to do is replicate the slimes from the slime hutch outside. I'll link the mods that I've mentioned in the description below, and now is a good time to mention that this project is technically possible without mods. But being able to see a slime's color values using the Lookup Anything mod is honestly a game changer. I would probably still be breeding slimes that don't drop diamonds without this data, so I highly recommend it if you want to try this project for yourself. So back to the slime breeding, my first idea is to get white slimes with 255 RGB color values across the board. I figured this would be the easiest to do because their color values max out at 255, and if you're familiar with the breeding mechanics I discussed in the last video, I thought I would have the best shot doing it this way. Luckily for me, this comes up easy enough because I have the Lookup Anything mod and I can finally track down exactly what color values each slime has. Honestly, I wish I had discovered this much sooner, so thank you Donovan for figuring that out. A few hours of selective slime breeding later, and slimes with a 255 RGB value across the board come easy enough. Now it's time to test out whether or not I have my first official white slime that drops diamonds 100% of the time. Unfortunately, and to my surprise, my test fails, and the slime doesn't drop diamonds. I tested on another slime because I'm thinking maybe this is just some kind of mistake, but it's not. They're not dropping diamonds, and I don't know why. I remember from the slimes in the hutch that their values were all equal to 254. And so my best hypothesis is that maybe with 255 being the max value, that means that they just can't drop diamonds. What I hadn't realized is that I still haven't uncovered my biggest mistake of this entire project yet. I figured, given my hypothesis, the next step was to try another value. I look through my slimes and I see that I have more than one slime with 249 values. So I begin to make 249 RGB slimes. I do make a small mistake here because of how values are passed down to the slime babies. If you recall from the last video, slimes have a 50% chance to pass down the average or a max value for each color value to their offspring. So that means I need to rely on the other 50% chance of a random value that's up to 25% lower than the parent's value. So that means using the slimes that have 255 values, I can only rely on the 50% chance of a random value that's up to 25% lower than the parent's value. Unfortunately, this mechanic works so that the value is randomly 25% lower or higher, meaning that the chance of lower RGB value slimes when breeding from a 255 slime is not that high. I do realize this a little late, but that's okay because I do have a group of yellow slimes that I've been saving since the last project. I decide to bring in some of those with the other white slimes to help bring down the RGB values. After much longer than I had anticipated, I have 249 slimes and I should now have my diamonds. It's time to test my theory, and it still doesn't work. This process takes much longer than I anticipated. I do wish I would have recognized it sooner, because I would have saved myself a lot of time. Finding out these slimes don't drop diamonds was like a knife in the gut. I was dejected and I had to step away. I still didn't understand why it wasn't working and was wondering if maybe the slimes in the hutch had some other property or something special about them that allowed them to drop diamonds. I was laying in bed that night and that's when it finally dawned on me. Even numbers. The key to all of this is even numbers. Not that all of the numbers are the same, but that they're even. 255 and 249 are odd numbers, but 254, like I saw in the hutch, that's an even number. It turns out, ever since I started this project, my understanding was all wrong. The RGB values don't have to be the same, they just have to be even numbers. I felt so stupid for this, but I was so excited at this revelation that I hopped out of bed because I needed to confirm this for myself. Luckily for me, I already had a batch of 255 slimes and 249 slimes, and when they breed together, the average is always going to be 252. So that means every baby from a 255 and 249 slime has a 25% chance of having an RG or B color value that's equal to 252. And that would be my magic number. I could selectively breed this group and pick slimes out until I had a batch of slimes that had 252 for their RG and B color values. Fast forward through a few more hours of selective breeding and I finally have 252 white slimes. The moment of truth was here and it was time to see if these homies drop diamonds or not. This project has finally come to a bittersweet conclusion with a few swings of my sword. I have created perfect white slimes. Through the grinding, the waiting, the massacring, the mistakes, and finally, the victory. The probability of the offspring of my white slimes also being perfect is 1 in 8, which is the same as flipping a coin and it landing on heads 3 times in a row. That's not ideal for mass farming diamonds, but I think I proved this to be a very unprofitable and inefficient project 80 hours ago. I'm both proud and ashamed to admit that my quest for perfect white slimes took me over 100 hours total. If you're interested in trying a slime project like this out, I highly recommend using the data mining feature of the Lookup Anything mod. It'll save you a lot of time, and I hope you've learned a thing or two from my suffering. It feels good to finally get this over with, and I think I'll make this file into a full-blown slime ranching experience. Shoutouts again to Donovan and Orpheus, because this project wouldn't have been successful without them. If you enjoyed this project and want to see some of the other things I'm working on, like the video and consider subscribing. Your support really means a lot, and it's also free, so just go for it. In other news, I'm moving in a few months, and there will be better internet, and I'm excited to start streaming on Twitch before the end of the year. Maybe I'll get to catch up with some of you there. Thanks for watching, and bye.